Imagine you are standing at the peak of everything you ever worked for. Your name is on the poster. Your face is on every magazine. The movie you just made is about survival, about women reclaiming their voices, about the courage it takes to walk away from something that is destroying you. And then, before the ink on the promotional tour even dries, you find yourself sitting across from a lawyer, preparing to go to war. Not in a movie. In real life. This is not a story about Hollywood gossip. This is not about two celebrities having a falling out. What happened between Blake Lively and director Justin Baldoni during and after the production of It Ends With Us, a film literally built on the message of standing up against abuse, is one of the most layered, legally complex, and emotionally charged stories to come out of the entertainment industry in years. And the deeper you look, the more uncomfortable it gets. Because at the center of this story is a question that does not have an easy answer. When two powerful people both claim to be the victim, when legal filings run into hundreds of pages, when PR firms are allegedly weaponized as tools of reputation destruction, how do you find the truth? How do you know who to believe? And what does it say about an industry that forced the question in the first place? Stay with this, because before this is over, something in the way you see Hollywood, maybe even the way you see power itself, is going to shift. If you have never subscribed to this channel before, this would be the right moment. Because this is what we do here. We do not chase headlines. We follow the thread until it tells us something real. Let's go back to where this publicly begins. Not where the private tension started, because none of us were in that room, but where the world first started paying attention. August 2024. It Ends With Us hits theaters. The film, based on Colleen Hoover's best-selling novel, is a story about a woman navigating a deeply abusive relationship, finding the strength to leave, and rebuilding her life. Heavy material. Necessary material. The kind of story that, when done right, changes people. Blake Lively stars in the film. Justin Baldoni directs it. On paper, this is a collaboration built for awards season. Two ambitious creatives. A powerful source novel. A message the world needed to hear. But from almost the first moment the promotional cycle begins, something feels off. Interviews feel tense in ways that are hard to name. Co-stars seem to orbit in separate gravitational fields. Blake and Justin are rarely photographed together in the way you would expect two collaborators who had just spent months making something meaningful to be. The smiles that are present feel practiced. The body language tells a different story than the words being spoken. And then, in December 2024, the legal documents become public. Blake Lively files a complaint against Justin Baldoni with the California Civil Rights Department. The allegations are serious. She claims sexual harassment on set. She claims a coordinated effort, involving a crisis PR firm, to damage her public reputation after she raised her concerns. She claims that what happened to her was not just personal. It was a system, a deliberate, organized machine designed to make her look unstable, difficult, and untrustworthy before she could make him look worse. Read that again slowly, because it matters. She is not just alleging that someone behaved badly. She is alleging that after she spoke up, a professional operation was put in motion to destroy her credibility, to make the public turn on her before the truth could turn on him. Have you ever stayed quiet about something because you were afraid of what would happen to your reputation if you spoke? If that question lands somewhere real for you, you are already understanding something important about why this case matters beyond the celebrity names attached to it. Now here is where responsible storytelling demands something that tabloid culture almost never gives you: context and balance. Justin Baldoni does not accept these characterizations. His legal team pushes back forcefully and publicly. In January 2025, Baldoni files a lawsuit of his own. He sues the New York Times for what his team calls a one-sided, misleading report on the situation. He sues for defamation, and he and his representatives maintain that the narrative being constructed around him is itself a coordinated attack, that Blake Lively and her team engaged in their own behind-the-scenes campaign to shape public opinion against him first. His lawsuit claims damages exceeding $250 million. $250 million. That is not a number you attach to a misunderstanding. That is a number that signals this has become, on both sides, a full-scale war. So now we have two people, both claiming reputational harm, both claiming the other side engaged in deliberate manipulation. Both with legal teams, both with public statements, both with entirely different versions of the same shared experience. And this is the part that should make you pause, because your instinct right now is probably to pick a side. The internet certainly did. Within hours of the original filings becoming public, social media had already delivered its verdict. Hashtags formed. Fan armies mobilized. People who were not present on set, had not read the full legal filings, and had no access to private communications were absolutely certain about who the villain was. That certainty, that speed of judgment, is something worth sitting with. Let's look at what the documents actually say publicly without editorializing. Blake Lively's legal complaint, filed with the California Civil Rights Department, outlines specific allegations of behavior on set that she describes as inappropriate and unwanted. It describes alleged conversations in which Baldoni made comments about her body, about physical contact, about scenarios that she says made her uncomfortable, and that she says she raised concerns about through proper channels. The complaint also contains what became perhaps the most discussed element of the entire case. References to communications involving Melissa Nathan, a crisis communications professional, and what the complaint characterizes as a coordinated plan to destroy Blake Lively's reputation in the public sphere if she moved forward with her allegations. Some of these communications were reportedly reviewed by journalists before publication. The specific nature and context of those communications became central to both the original reporting and to Baldoni's subsequent defamation lawsuit against the Times. Baldoni's team argues that the communications were taken out of context, that crisis PR is a standard and legal industry practice, and that what was characterized as a campaign against Blake was actually a legitimate effort to protect his reputation from what his team describes as a coordinated smear effort launched by Lively's side first. This is the honest truth of where things stand in the public record. Two competing legal narratives, each with documentation, each with legal teams arguing their version is the accurate one, and a court process that has not yet delivered a final resolution. What a moment like this does, if you let it, is force you to look at how much of what you think you know about powerful people is actually constructed. How much of every celebrity's public image is the result of teams of professionals working around the clock to shape perception. And how terrifying that machinery becomes when it is turned against you. But there is a layer to this story that exists entirely apart from the question of who is legally right. It ends with us. The film at the center of all of this is a story about intimate partner violence. It is a story about a woman who loves someone who hurts her, who finds it almost impossible to leave, who finally does, and who carries the weight of that choice for the rest of her life. Colleen Hoover wrote it partly from real experience. Millions of readers connected with it because it reflected something true about their own lives. Blake Lively chose this project. She fought for it. She has spoken publicly about how much the story meant to her personally, and about the responsibility she felt to honor the women whose experiences were reflected in it. And then, according to her legal filings, the experience of making that film became something she also had to survive. There is a painful, almost literary irony in that, and it is worth naming not for dramatic effect, but because it points to something real. The entertainment industry has spent years loudly proclaiming its commitment to change in the wake of the Me Too movement. Studios issue statements. Awards shows make speeches. Films get greenlit precisely because they carry messages about power and survival and women's voices. And then, if the allegations are accurate, a film built on exactly that message becomes a place where those same dynamics play out behind the camera. If that makes you feel something complicated, it should. This is exactly why some stories need more than a headline. Now let's talk about Ryan Reynolds, because his name is in the title of this video, and you deserve to know why and what his actual documented involvement is. Ryan Reynolds is Blake Lively's husband. They have been together since 2011 and married since 2012. They have 4 children. By every public account, they are a close partnership, personally and increasingly professionally. Reynolds is named in Baldoni's countersuit. The suit alleges that Reynolds was involved in behind-the-scenes efforts to shape the film's narrative, to influence how the promotional campaign was run, and to affect Baldoni's standing on the project. Baldoni's legal team characterizes Reynolds as an active participant in what they describe as a coordinated effort to sideline and damage Baldoni. Reynolds has not made extensive public statements about the case. His legal team has responded to the suit, and he denies the characterizations presented in Baldoni's filings. What is worth understanding is that the involvement of a spouse, particularly one as high-profile as Reynolds, in a professional dispute of this nature is genuinely unusual. It raises questions about where personal loyalty ends and professional conduct begins, about the extraordinary power dynamics at play when one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood is tangentially connected to a legal battle, and about how the presence of that name inevitably reshapes how the story is told and received. His name carries weight, and in a case that is already fundamentally about the power of narrative and reputation, that weight is not incidental. There is something else that has emerged from the public documentation of this case that deserves careful attention: the role of media and public perception as active weapons in modern disputes. The alleged use of a crisis PR firm, and the communications surrounding it, has lifted the curtain on something that most people know exists in theory but rarely get to see in documented form. The idea that when powerful people face damaging allegations, they do not simply respond. They deploy. They have teams. They run strategies. They identify vulnerabilities in their opponent's public image, and they work to amplify those vulnerabilities before the conversation can go elsewhere. This is not unique to Hollywood. It happens in politics. It happens in corporate boardrooms. It happens in sports. But it is rarely documented as explicitly as it appears to have been in this case. And that documentation, whatever the courts ultimately decide about its legal meaning, has given the public a glimpse into a machinery most people never see. And here is the part that is worth sitting with honestly: this machinery exists on all sides, not just one. Both sides in this dispute had communications teams. Both sides had strategies. Both sides were, in some form, managing narrative. The question that the courts will have to answer is where legitimate reputation management ends and tortious conduct begins. That is a genuinely complicated legal question, and it is one that will have implications far beyond this specific case. What do you think the line is? At what point does protecting your reputation become something else entirely? That question does not have an easy answer, and the fact that it does not is part of why this case matters. Let's talk about Colleen Hoover for a moment, because she is the person whose name is on the book that started all of this, and her position throughout has been one of the most quietly dignified in the entire situation. Hoover has spoken carefully and sparingly. She has expressed that she wants the film to reach the people it was made for, the survivors, the readers who connected with the story, the women who saw themselves in its pages. She has made clear that the story's message is bigger than any of the conflict surrounding it. She has not taken explicit public sides. She has not poured fuel on any fire. In a situation that has brought out the absolute worst of internet culture, the pile-ons, the obsessive speculation, the dehumanizing certainty, her restraint is, in its own quiet way, a form of integrity. The book sold over 20 million copies. The film, despite, or perhaps partly because of, the controversy surrounding it, performed strongly at the box office. The story found its audience. The message reached the people who needed it. That is worth something, even in the middle of everything else. Here is what we know with certainty as this script is being written. The legal process is ongoing. No court has issued a final ruling on the merits of either Blake Lively's civil rights complaint or Justin Baldoni's defamation lawsuit. No final judgment has been made about who bears legal responsibility for what. Both sides have legal teams actively working their cases. Both sides have denied the most serious characterizations made against them by the other. What that means, and this is important, is that anyone telling you they know exactly what happened, exactly who is the villain, exactly who is telling the truth, is telling you something they cannot actually know yet. The courts exist precisely because these things are complicated, because human situations are layered, because documentation has context and context matters, and neither the internet nor a YouTube documentary has the standing to replace a legal process. What this documentary can do, and what it has tried to do, is give you the full picture of what is publicly documented, present both sides of the legal dispute fairly, and ask you the harder questions that live underneath the headline. Questions like, what does it cost someone to come forward in an industry built on relationships and reputation? What does it cost someone to be publicly accused of something they deny? What does it tell us about power that both of those costs can be so devastating? And what do we owe each other as an audience, as consumers of media, as people who click and share and comment, in terms of how we treat real human beings whose lives become the content we consume. Blake Lively has not been silent throughout this. Her public statements have been careful, clearly shaped by legal counsel, but also carrying something that reads as genuine. She has spoken about wanting accountability. She has spoken about the pattern, the idea that what she experienced was not random or personal but systemic, a version of something that has happened to many women in many industries. Whether the courts ultimately validate those specific claims in full, in part, or not at all, the broader question she is pointing to is real, documented, supported by years of testimony from hundreds of people across dozens of industries. The specific legal outcome of this case does not change the reality of what the research tells us about power, about workplace dynamics, about the machinery that protects the powerful and isolates the vulnerable. That does not mean every allegation is true. It means the environment that makes certain kinds of behavior possible is real, and it deserves to be taken seriously even as individual claims are evaluated on their specific legal merits. There is one more thing worth saying before this reaches its conclusion. Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively are, by every public account, a family. For children, over a decade of partnership. Whatever is happening in courtrooms and legal filings, there are real people, people who did not choose to be part of a public legal battle, at the center of this. Children who will one day be old enough to search their parents' names and find all of this. That is not a reason to ignore the story. It is a reason to tell it with care. The people who deserve the most careful treatment in situations like this are always the ones who cannot speak. The children, the people without platforms, the ones who will carry the weight of decisions made by adults long after the headlines have moved on. If this story has taught us anything, if any of the publicly documented chaos of the past year has offered anything useful, it might be this: that reputation is fragile for everyone. That power is not the same as protection. That the machinery of public image, however sophisticated, cannot indefinitely contain something that is true. And that the pursuit of accountability and the presumption of innocence are not opposites. They are both things a fair system is supposed to hold at the same time. That is harder to do than it sounds. But it matters. It matters more than the speed of a take. It matters more than the satisfaction of a verdict delivered by a comment section. This is a story that is not over. The legal process will continue. New filings will emerge. Rulings will be made. And when they are, this is the kind of channel that will come back to them, not to chase the drama, but to close the loop honestly. To tell you what was decided, what it means, and what it does and does not prove. If that is the kind of storytelling that matters to you, the kind that stays with a story longer than the algorithm rewards, the kind that treats you as someone capable of holding complexity, then you already know why you should be here for the next chapter. Because the story is not finished. And neither is the conversation it deserves.